The sky cracked open on a Tuesday morning, not with thunder or lightning, but with silence. A deep, heavy silence that made birds stop flying and people look up from their phones. Then came the light. A streak across the sky faster than any jet, burning white and blue. It hit the Pacific Ocean with a soundless impact, sending up a column of steam and water that rose like a tower before collapsing back down. Military satellites blinked out first. Then cell towers lost signal. Radios filled with static. For nearly an hour, anyone within 100 miles of the crash zone was cut off from the world. When the signals returned, they carried something new, a low, repeating tone that no one could explain. Scientists scrambled. Governments argued. News channels replayed the same blurry footage over and over. Nobody knew what had fallen from the sky. All they knew was that it wasn't from Earth. Weeks passed before a team reached the site. The object sat half buried in the ocean floor, surrounded by a perfect circle of scorched sand and broken coral. It looked like a gauntlet, the kind knights used to wear, but sleeker, heavier, and covered in strange symbols that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. They called it the gauntlet. At first, everyone assumed it was a weapon, maybe a message from some alien species saying, "We see you." Or worse, "We're coming." Military experts studied it, scanned it, tried to move it. Nothing worked. It didn't respond to touch, heat, or sound. It just sat there, silent and still. Then exactly 72 hours after it landed, it activated. The ground shook. Not like an earthquake, but like the air itself was folding inward. Trees bent at impossible angles. The sand beneath the gauntlet lifted into the air and hung there, floating like dust in space. Time slowed inside the circle. Clocks ticked slower. Voices sounded deeper. Even light seemed to stretch. A Marine squad was the first to enter. They stepped inside the distortion zone with full gear, helmets on, weapons ready. They lasted less than 5 minutes. 3 never came out. Those who did were changed. They couldn't speak clearly. Their eyes darted around like they were seeing things others couldn't. Medics found no physical injuries, but their bodies showed signs of extreme stress, high adrenaline, rapid heartbeats, muscle fatigue like they'd run a marathon blindfolded. What happened in there? Nobody could say. The second attempt came 2 days later. This time, a team of scientists went in. They wore motion trackers, voice recorders, and cameras. Again, only some came out. The rest vanished without a trace. Footage from the surviving cameras was unclear. Blurred shapes, sudden shifts in gravity, walls that weren't there one moment and solid the next. It became clear. This was not a weapon. It was something else. Something meant to test. But test what? Governments debated. Keep it hidden? Destroy it? Study it more? None of the options felt safe. The gauntlet was unlike anything ever seen. It didn't follow the laws of physics. It responded to movement, not force. It punished those who tried to control it and rewarded those who adapted. One scientist, Lisa Porter, suggested something radical. "Maybe we're looking at this wrong," she said during a closed-door meeting. "What if it's not trying to hurt us? What if it's testing us?" Her theory was dismissed at first. Tests were for students, not entire species. But as more data came in, her idea started making sense. The gauntlet didn't target humans. Randomly, it reacted to behavior. Those who panicked failed. Those who stayed calm survived longer. Those who moved with the changes, not against them, sometimes made it through. So they tried something new. They opened applications. Not for soldiers, not for spies. For volunteers. People who could move fast. Think quick. Adapt. They called them runners. Jason Keller saw the call online while working his shift at a gym in Chicago. He read the details twice, then laughed out loud. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. He was 31, average height, average build. Not a soldier. Not a genius. Just a guy who loved to move. Parkour, weightlifting, obstacle races. Whatever kept him on his feet and his mind sharp. His boss, Maria, leaned over his phone. "Are you seriously thinking about this?" "Why not?" Jason said. "I've done harder stuff for fun." "This isn't fun," Maria said. "People have died." "Yeah," Jason said, "but not the ones who knew how to move." He applied that night. 3 weeks later, he stood outside the distortion zone, wearing a tight black suit with sensors sewn into the seams. Behind him, a row of tents buzzed with activity. Scientists, doctors, and military observers watched from a safe distance. In front of him, the gauntlet sat where it always had, pulsing softly. He took a deep breath. "Ready?" someone asked. "As I'll ever be," he said. He stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the invisible line, everything changed. The ground tilted. Not physically, but in his head. It felt like walking into a dream where up was sideways and forward was backward. He staggered, caught himself, and forced his breathing to stay steady. Walls formed out of nowhere. Not real walls, shimmering lines of energy that blocked his path. He ducked under one, rolled past another, climbed over a third. Gravity shifted again. He felt lighter, like he could jump 10 feet. Then heavier, like every step weighed a ton. He moved with it. When the floor dropped away beneath him, he didn't panic. He twisted midair and landed on a floating platform that hadn't been there a second ago. His heart pounded. Sweat ran down his face, but he kept moving. Every second mattered. He remembered what Lisa Porter had said in a video briefing. "Don't fight it. Flow with it. It's not about strength. It's about adaptation." He followed her advice. He jumped when the floor disappeared, slid when the walls closed in, climbed when the ceiling lowered. He didn't know where he was going, but he trusted his body. And somehow he made it. After 6 minutes and 23 seconds, he stumbled out of the distortion zone, gasping for air. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees. Silence. Then, applause. He looked up. The crowd was cheering. He had done what no soldier or scientist had managed. He had finished the trial. Behind him, the gauntlet pulsed brighter, like it recognized him, like it liked him. Jason Keller was not a hero. He didn't wear capes or carry weapons. He didn't give speeches or ask for money. He was just a guy who knew how to move. But after what he did in the distortion zone, people started paying attention. News channels replayed footage of him stumbling out covered in sweat, breathing hard but alive. Interviews with scientists tried to explain what had happened, but no one really understood. All they knew was that Jason had done something no soldier or scientist could. He hadn't fought the gauntlet. He had moved with it. His video interview spread online like wildfire. Someone asked him how he made it through. "I didn't think about winning," he said. "I just kept moving." That line showed up on t-shirts, memes, even gym posters. People started calling it the Jason method. Others tried to follow his example. More volunteers stepped forward. Not soldiers this time, but athletes, dancers, climbers, and runners. Anyone who knew how to adapt. Some failed. Some barely made it out. But some, like Jason, finished the trial. One of them was Maria Cruz, a rock climber from Colorado. She had never joined the military or worked in science. She spent her days scaling mountains and teaching others how to do the same. When she entered the distortion zone, she used what she knew best: balance, grip, timing. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She climbed. She made it out in under 7 minutes. Another was Dan Parker, a sprinter from Texas. He didn't try to fight the shifting walls or floating platforms. He ran, fast, smart, and light on his feet. He finished in 6.5 minutes. Each new success added to the growing theory. The gauntlet wasn't testing strength or firepower. It was testing movement, instinct, and adaptation. Those who moved with it survived. Those who fought it failed. Governments started changing their approach. Instead of sending in elite teams with guns and armor, they opened the program wider. They called it the Adaptive Challenge Initiative, a fancy name for letting regular people try their luck. Gyms around the world started training for it. They built obstacle courses that mimicked the distortion zones. They added moving walls, unstable floors, and timed challenges. They called it gauntlet-style training. It became popular fast. People weren't just doing it to prepare for the real thing. Why, they were doing it because it was fun. It pushed them harder than any normal workout ever had. Jason got invited to help design some of the first official gauntlet-style gyms. He didn't know much about engineering or physics, but he knew how to move. And that was enough. He traveled across the country, setting up training centers, giving talks, showing people how to move like he did. Maria Cruz joined him, so did Dan Parker. Soon, a whole team formed. Former athletes, stunt performers, martial artists, even circus acrobats. They trained together, studied the footage, practiced again and again, and slowly, they figured out patterns. The gauntlet didn't change randomly. It followed rules. Strange ones, yes, but rules nonetheless. If you moved too slow, the floor dropped away. If you hesitated at a wall, it closed in. If you tried to run straight through, you hit invisible barriers. But if you stayed light, kept moving, adjusted quickly, you could make it through. After a few months, the number of successful runners grew. Not everyone made it, but more did than before. The world was starting to see the gauntlet not as a threat, but as a test, a challenge, something to be beaten, not with weapons, with skill. Then came the next big shift. Tech companies started studying the gauntlet's effects. They wanted to understand how it bent space, slowed time, and responded to movement. Some parts were impossible to copy, but others, they could mimic. They built special rooms, small, controlled spaces that recreated parts of the distortion zone. They called them adaptive fitness labs. Inside these labs, walls moved, gravity shifted, and time played tricks on the mind. People paid to use them. Schools added them to physical education programs. Even hospitals used them for therapy, helping patients regain balance, coordination, and confidence. What was once a mystery from outer space had become part of daily life. Jason watched it all unfold and shook his head. "Who would have thought," he said one day, watching a group of teenagers train inside a lab. "Something meant to destroy us and now part of our workout." Dan laughed. "You say that like it's over." It wasn't. Every few weeks, another distortion zone appeared somewhere in the world. Each one held a new version of the gauntlet, slightly different from the last. Some were easier, some were harder. None of them repeated the same pattern twice. Scientists still couldn't figure out how the gauntlets arrived or who sent them, but they didn't need to. The focus had shifted. Humans were adapting, fast, better than anyone expected. Then came the invitation, a signal, broadcast from deep space. It was short. It was clear. It said, "You have passed the first test." Nobody knew who sent it, but everyone knew what it meant. This was bigger than Earth, bigger than the gauntlet. This was the start of something new. Jason stood outside the latest distortion zone, looking at the sky. Next to him, Maria Cruz adjusted her gloves. "So what now?" she asked. He smiled. "We keep moving." And they did, because that's what humans did. They adapted. They moved. They survived. And sometimes they even thrived. The message had come from space. Short. Clear. You have passed the first test. No one knew who sent it. No one knew how far away they were. But everyone understood what it meant. Humans had done something no other species had done before. They had adapted. Not just once, but again and again. And now someone or something was watching. Scientists tried to send a reply. Governments debated what to say. Religious leaders called it a sign. Conspiracy theorists claimed they saw it coming. But Jason Keller didn't care about any of that. He was busy training. So were thousands of others. What started as a deadly mystery had become a global movement. Gyms now had gauntlet zones built into their floors. Schools tested students on adaptive movement. Even professional sports added new events inspired by the distortion zones. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about skill, about speed, about knowing how to move when the world refused to stay still. In Los Angeles, a group of teenagers trained inside a local gym. The walls moved, the floor shifted, lights blinked in strange patterns. They ran through it like it was second nature. In Tokyo, a dancer named Hiroshi used gauntlet-style movements in his performances. blending art with survival. In Berlin, a former soldier turned fitness coach taught people how to fall safely, how to land correctly, how to keep moving even when gravity lied. People weren't scared of the gauntlet anymore. They respected it. Some even loved it, because it made them better, stronger, faster, smarter. Jason traveled across the country, helping set up new training centers. He worked with engineers, athletes, and doctors. He didn't know science. He didn't need to. He knew movement. And that was enough. Maria Cruz stayed close, helping design the hardest courses. Dan Parker opened his own gym in Texas, calling it the path. Soon others followed. A new sport grew out of it all. Gauntlet runs. Participants entered special arenas built to mimic the distortion zones. They had to move fast, think faster, and never stop adapting. The best ones became stars. Their names spread online. Videos of their runs went viral. Kids wanted to be like them. It was no longer about surviving. It was about winning, and humans loved to win. Then came the next gauntlet. This time, it landed in Russia. Like the others, it sat quietly for days before activating. Then, the distortion zone formed around it. Governments argued over who should go in first. Should it be soldiers, scientists, athletes? In the end, they chose a mix. But the first one through the gate was not a soldier, not a scientist, not even from a big city. Her name was Emily Ross. She was 16, from a small town in Ohio. She had grown up watching Jason's videos, practicing obstacle courses in her backyard. She wasn't the fastest, she wasn't the strongest, but she could move. When she stepped into the distortion zone, she did what she always did. She kept going. Walls rose, floors dropped, gravity twisted. She rolled, climbed, jumped. 6 minutes and 17 seconds later, she walked out. Alive. Cheering broke out across the world. A teenager had beaten the gauntlet alone, without help. After that, more young runners joined. Some were older, some younger. They trained together, learned from each other, pushed themselves harder than anyone before. Schools started offering gauntlet training as part of physical education. Colleges offered scholarships for top performers. Parents signed their kids up for weekend classes. It was no longer just a challenge. It was a way of life. And then came the next signal. Another message from space. This time, longer, more detailed. It said, "You have passed our tests. You are ready for the circle." Nobody knew what the circle was, but scientists guessed. They thought it might be a meeting place, a proving ground, or maybe something bigger, something beyond Earth. Governments scrambled. Military leaders met. Diplomats argued. Should they respond? Should they send someone? Who? Again, Jason didn't wait for answers. He started training. So did Maria. So did Dan. So did hundreds of others. They knew what was coming. They had spent years preparing. The gauntlet had changed them, made them stronger, made them ready. And now, the universe was calling. The world was changing, not because of war, not because of fear, but because of movement. What started as a strange alien object had become more than anyone could have imagined. Gyms trained people to move like Jason Keller. Schools taught students how to think fast and stay light on their feet. Cities built special zones where people could test themselves against shifting walls and unstable floors. And now, there was a message. You have passed our tests. You are ready for the circle. Nobody knew who sent it. Nobody knew what the circle was, but everyone wanted to find out. Scientists tried to decode the signal. They found more data hidden inside, maps, patterns, symbols that looked like the ones on the gauntlet. Slowly, they pieced together what they could. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation, a call to something bigger, something far away. Governments argued over what to do. Some wanted to send soldiers. Others wanted scientists. Some wanted to wait, to study more to be sure. But time was moving faster than politics because more gauntlets were landing. In Africa, in South America, in Asia, each one different. Each one testing something new. Some tested speed, some tested balance, some tested teamwork, and every time, humans passed, sometimes alone, sometimes together, but always forward. Jason Keller stood in front of a crowd at a training center in Chicago. Behind him, a group of young runners practiced on a course he helped design. Ahead of him, hundreds of people watched, waiting to hear what he would say. He didn't give speeches often. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a scientist. He was just someone who knew how to move. But now, people listened when he spoke. He looked at the crowd and said, "We've spent years learning how to survive the gauntlet. But maybe that's not the point anymore," he paused. "Maybe the point is to understand it." Murmurs spread through the crowd. He continued, "Someone made this thing, not to hurt us, not to scare us, but to see if we were ready." He looked up at the sky. And I think we are. Across the world, people started asking the same question. If the gauntlet was a test, then who made it and why? Research teams worked non-stop. They studied the data from the signals, the materials from the gauntlets, and the patterns in how they arrived. They found something surprising. The gauntlets weren't random. They followed a path, a pattern, like breadcrumbs across the stars. One team in Europe cracked part of the code. They found a name, or something close to it. The Virex. No one knew who they were, but the name spread fast. Videos online showed people trying to pronounce it. Virex. Virex? Virex. Like saying a new word for the first time. Scientists guessed the Virex were not warriors. They were watchers, testers, selectors. They traveled the galaxy looking for species that could adapt, that could move with change, not fight it. Many had failed. Some collapsed under pressure. Others turned violent. But humans kept going. They didn't stop when things got hard. They learned. They changed. They moved. So the Virex kept watching. And now, they were offering more. The circle. Whatever that meant. Governments formed a task force. They called it the Adaptive Response Unit. Its job was to prepare for whatever came next. They didn't send diplomats, they didn't send generals, they sent runners, people who had passed the gauntlet trials, people who knew how to move, how to think, how to adapt. Jason was among them. So was Maria Cruz Dan Parker too. They trained harder than ever before, not just for strength, for instinct, for reaction, for timing. Because this time, there would be no practice rounds. This time, they would step into the unknown. And they had to be ready. Months passed. Then the final signal came. Clear. Direct. Prepare for contact. Everyone felt it, not just in space, but here, on Earth. Kids stopped playing to look up. Workers paused mid-task. Even animals seemed to sense it. Something was coming. And then it arrived. Not with fire, not with noise, but with light. A soft glow in the sky, not falling, just appearing, like it had always been there. A massive structure floated above the Pacific Ocean, where the first gauntlet had landed. It looked like a ring. Not solid, not metal, but something else. Something alive. Or maybe not alive, just aware. Scientists scrambled. Leaders met. People watched. And then the portal opened. On the ground, near the edge of the distortion zone, a circle of energy formed. It shimmered, pulsed, waited. The Adaptive Response Unit gathered nearby. Jason stood at the front. He looked at Maria. She nodded. He looked at Dan. He gave a thumbs up. Then, without another word, Jason stepped forward, into the light. Others followed, one by one. Not with weapons, not with armor, but with skill, with heart, with trust. They had spent years preparing, learning, adapting. Now, it was time to see if it was enough. As the last runner stepped through, the portal closed behind them. Silence. Then, The ring in the sky pulsed once and vanished, leaving nothing behind except hope and the knowledge that humans had taken their next step, not as soldiers, not as conquerors, but as survivors, as learners, as those who could move with the unknown and thrive. The world watched, not with fear, not with silence, but with hope. As the last runner stepped through the portal, the glowing circle pulsed once, then vanished into the sky. Those who had trained for this moment were gone. Jason Keller, Maria Cruz, Dan, Parker, and dozens more. They had spent years learning how to move, how to adapt, how to survive inside the Gauntlet's trials. Now they were somewhere else, somewhere far away, and no one knew what waited on the other side. On Earth, people waited. Governments held meetings. Scientists studied data. Families prayed. Kids talked about it at school like it was the most exciting thing ever. Some said the runners would come back as heroes. Others said they might never return. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humans had taken a step beyond their planet. Not with warships, not with weapons, not with conquest, but with movement, with skill, with heart. In the days that followed, nothing happened. No message, no signal, just silence. Then, weeks later, something changed. A new pulse appeared in space. Not from Earth. From farther out. It sent a single line of text, translated into every language on the planet. It read, "You have entered the circle." The world erupted. People cheered in the streets. Gyms held special training sessions in honor of the runners. Schools added new lessons about the journey. For the first time in history, humans were not just watching the stars. They were part of them. Back on Earth, Jason's old gym in Chicago became a place of pilgrimage for young athletes. People came from all over just to stand where he once stood, to run the same course he once ran. Maria's videos were played in classrooms across the world. Dan Parker's gym in Texas grew bigger than ever. New runners trained harder than before. Because now there was proof. The gauntlet wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Months passed. Then, a second message arrived. This time, longer, more detailed. It said, "You have passed our tests. You are among us now. Learn. Grow. Show us what you can become." Nobody knew exactly what it meant, but everyone understood the spirit behind it. The Virex were not conquerors. They were teachers, guides, watchers, and they had opened the door. On Earth, new programs began, not just for athletes, for engineers, for thinkers, for dreamers, people who could imagine what came next. The Adaptive Response Unit started training new teams, not just for survival, for contact, for exploration, for understanding. The gauntlet had changed everything. What was once feared as a weapon had become a tool, a way to teach humans how to think differently, how to move with change instead of against it, how to trust themselves, how to trust each other. And now, the universe was waiting. In the years that followed, more portals opened, some above cities, some near oceans, some deep in space. Each one led to a new test, a new challenge, a new chance to prove that humans could keep up, could keep moving, could keep growing. And each time, someone stepped through, not alone, but with others, with friends, with teammates, with hearts full of courage. On distant worlds, the runners learned new ways to move. They met species that had also passed the tests. Some looked like animals, some looked like light. Some didn't look like anything humans had imagined, but they all shared one thing. They had adapted, like humans. They had moved forward, like humans. They had earned their place in the circle. And so, the legend spread. Stories of Jason Keller, who ran through walls that shouldn't exist. Of Maria Cruz, who climbed floors that shifted beneath her feet. Of Dan Parker, who sprinted through time itself. They became symbols, not of strength, not of power, but of adaptability, of knowing when to move, when to shift, when to keep going, even when things made no sense. And on Earth, life kept changing. Cities built new gyms. Schools taught new skills. Kids trained for a future they couldn't yet see. Because now, they knew. Space was not a wall. It was a door, and humans were not afraid to walk through it. One day, many years later, a new message came from far away from the circle. It said, "You have grown. You have learned. You are ready to build." Build what? No one knew. But that didn't matter, because the answer would come. In time. And when it did, humans would be ready. Not with weapons, not with fear, but with movement, with skill, with heart. Because that's what humans do. They adapt, they move, they rise, and sometimes they even become legends.